what you want, when you want it, where you want it. This is The Mesh.
We'll try not to like too much talk over each other, but again, we are girls and we are
agree to disagree.
Okay,
Moving on.
well, the makeup bottle.
Not little.
It's like a cracked out T-bird, some grease.
Yeah, I can
You
see
know,
that.
she's got that black hair.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of ChickChat, where today we are devoting an entire show to one of our favorite topics. That's right, we're talking about royalty. We're talking about our queen. And when I say our queen, I mean it in like the yes, queen type of way, as opposed to our queen as in ruler, because she is not. We are American. However, we love all things royal, and it has been a very an interesting past couple weeks for the royal family. Let me put it that way. Jeanette, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, thanks. We're just going to hop right into it because anybody who's listened to Chick Chat before knows we talk about the royal family some. I mean, a little. Here and
A
there,
little
right?
bit.
Right, yeah.
We touch on it from now and then.
We throw it in there when we can. And, you know, it only seemed fitting that after the queen passed, we would have a show about it. And it's just going to be about the festivities and everything that's taken place since her passing. You know, she was, 96 years old? Like, we were not blind to the fact that this was going to happen. We went through Prince Philip passing away. And then now, you know, the queen passed away peacefully. And everything that we've been dreading yet anticipating it's a weird mix, right? Because nobody wants you to pass away, but like we know that there's just this celebration, right, that is going to be had in her honor, and all the details and all of the things that go into play for it. It's just crazy. I mean, we're just going to have to start. So yesterday was the funeral. We're not breaking news here. People know that the queen died. This is worldwide news. Our 6 listeners in like Saudi Arabia, I know they listen and they know this. So everybody is up to date. But the funeral did happen yesterday, and we're putting this episode out today. We purposely waited until after the funeral had happened so we could just break down the series of events that have happened over the past, you know, almost 2 weeks now. But yes, it's just been kind of a chain of events of exciting things to happen. Since September 8th, when the queen did pass, she was at Balmoral, which we knew, her lovely getaway home. And from things we've heard for years, was Operation London Bridge is what they call the plan of action when the queen dies. The code words have always been noted as London Bridge is down, London Bridge has fallen. And when London Bridge has fallen, that means the queen has passed, and everything that's been in play for nearly 70 years goes into action. Now, everything, from what I understand, has happened with Operation London Bridge, but now they did have to tweak it, and they call it Operation Unicorn because she was at Balmoral. She was not at her, you know, she wasn't at Buckingham Palace and whatnot. So that obviously changes the plans of where everything goes. So, Jeanette, I'm going to toss it to you. Just give me a little rundown of things that went through your head and what you know, obviously it's a sad day, but you know, the protocol and the traditions are things we talk about a lot on this show. What were some things that you were curious about as all of this took place?
You know, I don't know. It was one of those, like you said, you know, she was 96, so it wasn't unexpected, but still a little shocking at the same time, I think. I think when
Yeah.
you think of someone who had just earlier that week welcomed the new prime minister into her
I
home and was on
know.
a camera standing up shaking hands, and but she did lose a husband a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
Um, she was up there herself. It was just one of those things where you're like, okay, well, she could live to be 99. She could live to be 100. Her mother lived
Yeah.
a very long life. I mean, it's so I don't know that I knew what to expect because I haven't had an experience other than Queen Elizabeth in my lifetime. I've never experienced anything
Right.
like a royal death. I think the closest we came was Diana.
Yes.
Um, and I'm
And
not even
Philip.
sure that that was in Philip, right? But that was during COVID,
Yep.
and Princess Diana had technically been outside of the royal family by the time she passed. Um,
And it
her
was
sons were
unexpected
and was
um,
unexpected, and
because
her
of the
children were
aging.
obviously still in line for the throne, so there was
Right.
some, royalty connection there. But and she was, she wasn't a commoner herself, so
Right.
but I think I was thinking, okay, it's going to be somewhere in between, or definitely going to be more extravagant than Phillips was, because he didn't want a lot of things, right?
He didn't, and he wasn't the queen, right? I mean, it's you hate to. I
Right,
don't want to demoralize it at all with what I mean, or desensitize anybody from what his value was. But yeah, everybody just knew it was going to be different. This
right,
is something that really, the reason I heard on a show the other day somebody say, I'm not really sure, how long people are going to be talking about this because it's in Europe or in England, yes, that's their queen, that's their monarch, that's what they do. Well, in America, everybody loves the royal family or the stories of it, not everybody, but clearly, people talk about the royal family and stuff. We have these connections, but that's not our ruler, right? That's not our monarchy. And so, they were like, how long is it going to take? And I'm like, yeah, but it's not about that. It's about the fact that not nobody, but it's been a long, long time since anybody has had to experience somebody other than Queen Elizabeth.
yeah. I mean,
That's
I've never known anybody else in my
that's
lifetime.
that's just it,
Like, yeah,
right? And she's been serving like twice of our lifetimes,
right,
almost,
yeah,
and that's crazy. That's crazy.
right. I think the closest we come are presidential funerals, and
Yeah, yeah,
we can see the Kennedy one on film or
right,
video.
right.
We were around for Reagan's.
Yeah,
I think that's probably the closest we come, but it's nothing as
the
far as
the
the
protocol is
protocol.
nothing the same.
It's nothing the same. What I found, I think the first time, they had that 10 days of mourning,
Yes,
and I heard that the grandchildren were going to stand visual. And I
yeah,
didn't really know what that meant. I thought, okay, they'll go and stand where she is and
right.
surround her coffin. I didn't realize that people were going to be walking by them. That
Me
was
neither.
completely awkward.
Yeah.
Um, I think that was the first time that a real tear came to my eye because that just looked devastating for them.
Well, that and the children,
The children,
the four
yes.
children, and then all the grandchildren, two separate times. So
Yeah.
let's get to that actually. So we know that the queen, the she when she passed was at Balmoral. She stayed at Balmoral for what 2 days probably. That gave some time for the family to come in and leave. Of course, Charles and the boys came back. Harry flew over as soon as he had the news, but he was not there in time before she passed. But he did come out there, and so the boys were there. And then I say the queen. We know it's obviously her body, but the queen stayed there and allowed for the Balmoral staff to have time to pay their respects. And then she was brought to Holyrood and in Scotland. And that's where she came and lay in state there. Processional, we saw online, and that's where she came for another couple days. Gave that area some time for saying their goodbyes. And then she was brought flown and by train to England, to London. Brought in. She then is, help me here. She goes from when she arrives in England, she then went to a chapel, I believe.
I
No,
don't.
she went straight to Lion State.
Yes.
And that's when people could come and walk past after she had been in there. And there was a processional, and that's when the processional to lead her to this place. And that's when we started finding out there was going to be these vigils that are stood. First one would be by her children, 4 children, now King Charles, Anne, Edward, and Andrew. All 4 of them would stand vigil, and then there would be another one of grandchildren. So I, like you, was anxiously awaiting that because I just didn't quite understand what that meant. But I tell you who put a tear in my eye was, Anne. Anne in her uniform coming out there, breaking all kinds of tradition and protocol, right? Like, the ladies aren't supposed to be walking behind the casket. The ladies aren't supposed to be following in uniform. And she said she was. And she did. She's been in uniform since all this has started, really. And to see her stand there with her brothers and kind of almost hold her own space, right? I don't know. I mean, we all have such strong opinions of the strong person that Queen Elizabeth was. And then to kind of just see that Anne is, it's not like everybody sits around and compares the two, but
She's a chip off the old block. Yeah, she's her mother's daughter.
I thought it was so cool to see,
And to see that, and to see Charles, who honestly looks like he's aged 10 years in 10 days.
In just these last days.
I mean, he looks so different. And I'm sure the weight of the world is on him. Not only is he losing his mother,
literally,
but now has to follow a beloved queen. And everyone's always been talking about he should just pass the throne to William.
Just abdicate.
Not as popular.
Yeah.
He knows that his queen consort isn't as popular. There's still there's going to be this should be Diana.
Right.
He's facing a lot on top of losing his mother. And, even at the children's days, I think Edward's the youngest at 58, which, wow, he's
right.
58. That's not too far from how old we are, right?
I know.
So, even Charles in his 70 plus years, you're like, my mom's 96. It's still not one of those where you're like, yeah, it was going to happen at some point. No, I mean, it's still your mom.
It's still his mom. Yeah.
Right.
That's the thing that's one of the things, obviously, that's so interesting to me to look at. I sit there and you see these stoic faces of royalty a lot of times, right? They're held to this standard of poise and grace and kind of stone-like in their daily lives, right? Outside of this. And of course, even, during weddings and everything else, there's smiles and whatnot, but they're all very poised. And with this, I almost just expected these very stone-like figures to continue, especially in something solemn like a funeral for Gran or their mother, whatever position they may be. But there's been emotion,
Yeah, a lot of choking back of emotion, which has been
visible.
Hard to watch.
Very visible emotion from the children, including Charles, who I don't envision seeing that of, a lot.
No, I didn't see it, but I did see a broadcaster say that Edward was in tears, that you could see the tears. He and Sophie were in tears.
I've noticed Sophie through multiple processions / the funeral, the walk, all that stuff. Sophie's had a very difficult time with it. I don't know if she's an emotional person or if she just had a very close relationship with the queen, which we've always kind of heard that she did.
Yeah.
I think Edward and Sophie being the younger ones.
Being the youngest, yeah.
Let's be honest, they've had a very healthy, from what we see, relationship, right? Kind of out of the news, nothing really
You forget about them sometimes. Like, oh
You
yeah, there's
forget
4
about
children.
them. Yes, you're just kind of like, oh, Edward, you know, and maybe that made them close with the family. I don't know. Like maybe that was held a special place for all of them, you know, like they are kind of quiet. So maybe they were just
Plus,
there.
he's the baby. So I
Yeah.
mean,
Maybe they were there for every Sunday dinner or something. I don't know.
right.
Like,
I think what hit me with the grandchildren is as much as she was the queen and, like we said, did her duty and everything, you could tell that she was a devoted grandmother and a
yeah,
loved grandmother. It,
yeah.
it wasn't one of those, yeah, she's our grandmother, but she's the queen, so we weren't really like
We've
that
never seen
close.
her. Yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, you could tell in the emotion of all of them that
And
that was their grandma. And I read that she had a close relationship with her own grandfather, so I'm sure that was one thing that she was very proud of, is just her role, not only as queen, but her private role as
right.
a mom and a grandmother.
Right. And she's been so lucky to be able to see a lot of them get married, have their own children, that type of stuff, which,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
has to be a sense of pride in some sense, no matter what their position is or anything. And there's a wide range of age there, you know. So I
yeah,
mean, what Louise and James is it? You know,
they're young.
they're young,
Well,
you know. I
Edward's
mean,
young. So,
yeah, exactly, because that's their dad, and this
yeah,
is you know their granny. That's what they would
yeah,
say. And, you know, all these notes and tributes that they've done, and you know, to hear them talk about the hugs and the smiles and the time spent together and stuff that they're gonna miss. You know, this was their grandma. Like that's
yeah. And this is, I
you
think, the
forget
first
that, right?
time. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it hit me watching that visual of them because the emotion on their faces, like, oh yeah, this is
And the little ones
grandma.
looked so young, like the
Yes.
youngest that were standing vigil, you know, Louise
Yeah.
and them. They look so young. And they're standing there in front of people and in front of this coffin with their head bowed, and it was super emotional.
And awkward. Like
It
I didn't
was. It
realize
was
that people
very
were going to be
strange.
walking by them. I was like,
People walking by.
they're like a show and I don't like it. I didn't like it.
I did not, I was with you on the boat. Like, I did not think people were just going to be walking by. Like, how do you differ? I guess if it was me, and this sounds horrible, but I'm just going to tell the truth. If I'm in line to go pay my respects to the queen because I live in that country, right? And I'm a person. But I see William and Harry up there, like me personally, it changes the the idea of what I'm seeing that day.
Yeah.
Like I said, that sounds a little horrible, but I almost become a little more starstruck that I'm seeing them versus
Right.
paying respects to
Paying
the queen.
respects. Yeah.
And I know that that's not anybody's point. I get
Right.
that. But you just can't help but wonder, like, good gracious, like there was a whole bunch of people in those lines.
And I was glad it was only for 15 minutes because I was like, how
Yes.
long are they going to do this? I don't like the people walking by them and they can't move. And
Mm-hmm.
it was
On their head bowed and
their head bowed. And yeah, and this is
really
the first,
some of them's their first time in there. Like that's a very hard thing to do
right. Yes.
emotionally.
Yeah. And I think this is the first time this week that I thought this may be why Harry rushed to marry Meghan, is because he wanted his grandmother and grandfather at his wedding. He wanted them to meet his children. There could have been a whole plethora of
Sure.
reasons, when
Maybe,
you've got
absolutely.
grandparents who are in their 90s, you
Yeah,
don't say,
sure.
"Oh, well, I've got time," right? When you've
No,
got grandparents in their
absolutely.
80s, you don't say, "Oh, I've got time." Like,
Especially when they're royalty, right? And
right.
you're about to
Yeah.
have
Royal
there's going to
wedding.
be a royal wedding of some sort. Like,
Yes.
let's not do it on the heels of the queen of the death of the queen, right?
Yes. Right. Right.
That becomes an issue. And we're going to get to Harry and Meghan in just a minute.
Oh,
Um, there's a whole lot to unpack there, but essentially, yes, we've kind of broken down. Like she came back. She was lying in state for people to come, the public to view. There were lines, hours long waits to go through this line. I saw some very fitting and special tributes of special people that made trips to go out there or David Beckham was in line, like with the people. He's in line, And I was just like,
Yeah.
wow,
He probably could have gotten a private viewing, but
probably. But I
yeah.
mean, I think as much as David Beckham has been involved with the royal events over the years, this was one of those times where they were like, dude, just get in line. Like,
Right.
we'll get you up here, but just get in line because we got other things going on.
Well, the fact that she planned everything and didn't leave it to anyone. Again, she knew I'm in my 90s. Who knows how long she's had this plan? But the
Yes.
music, the arrangements, where things would take place,
Every single
every
bit of it.
detail.
That is the Operation London Bridge going into effect. And I'm amazed by that. Now, one thing I've learned over the years, I don't have any grandparents living still, but I was very lucky to have them into my adulthood. So I knew all of them and got to spend time with them and stuff. But one thing I learned is that it's a very kind thing to plan your arrangements for your
Yes.
family, if that makes
Yes.
sense.
It does.
Even on our level, right? Like,
Oh,
not
yeah.
queen.
My dad, when my dad passed, he had everything spelled out. We
Yeah.
didn't have to worry about anything. And that was like such a weight off.
Well, and that's what I've heard, that is just such a blessing to have someone do that for you. It's just so nice at that
It's
time.
not a fun thing to plan. Yeah.
It's not a fun thing to plan. It's not a fun thing to think about planning.
Right.
But when you're the queen, I can only imagine the detail of everything that has to go into play, right? So that's one thing I wanted to bring up. Like, not only is she putting this plan into action by passing away, right? She literally takes her last breath and the switch is flipped. Like, it goes into motion. Now, all that stuff, from all we see, has gone really swimmingly, like just beautifully. There are so many things because England and her Commonwealth, places have so many connections for the past 70 some years of her tied to everything. She's on their money. Their, national song or whatnot is all about her. I don't know if you've been to London, but when I've been to London, everything, the columns, the light poles, the door handles, everything has ER and the crown on it, like a stamp. It's like everywhere. It's on the pothole covers. Her stamp is everywhere. And I mean stamp like her initials or whatnot. ER for Elizabeth Regina is how they say it. And CR will be Charles. And there's so much that will be swapped over. So much.
And just to think that the next three in line are all men.
Yeah.
So, we're talking about many, many years before we ever see another queen. And that's only if, and this is thinking way ahead in the future, because Charles's oldest son is
Right.
9. Not Charles, but William's oldest son is 9. So if he were to have a daughter as a firstborn, that would be the next person in line to be queen.
Right. Which is well off. Right.
Right. Which is so far off. And
And
so,
you think about how long we've had all of Elizabeth's stuff. I'm saying stuff very lightly, but like I said, she's on the money. She's in the song. She's on the stamps everywhere. Everywhere in Europe or in London and England and stuff, her pictures on everything, her likeness, her little cameo shadow pictures, that stuff is everywhere. That was something that blew my mind whenever I was studying abroad in college. It's everywhere.
And that will change, right?
Here, that doesn't happen here. We do not see,
We put dead people on our money.
right? We don't
Yeah.
see President Biden's picture
No,
everywhere or his initials everywhere or
no.
his stamp everywhere. We don't, that stuff's not
You
in
have to
front of,
be a dead president
you
or a
gotta be dumb.
historian. Yes.
Yes.
Then we'll think about putting your picture on it. But so
Yes.
will that all change now? Will it now become Charles's picture, or will they
It's gonna
keep
have
her
to.
picture?
Yeah, no, I think it's him all over. Um,
Well, and what was awkward was hearing them sing immediately, "God Save the King."
God
I
save
was
the
like, "Oh
king.
my gosh,
I know.
I don't like this."
It's strange. Like immediately she takes her last breath and boom, you're the king. And all of that stuff has to get set into motion. And so it'll be interesting to see, and that stuff trickles down to like Australia, Canada, all these different things, right? Like money and the their protocol of things you say and do, right? All relates to the king now, not to serve her queen, right? So those are things that we're going to have to like be anxiously awaiting to see what's happening.
And the
Um,
coronation that we have to wait for, whether it's 6 months or a year from now. I think they were saying 5 to 6 months, maybe.
oh, really? Is that how long?
Well, yeah, they said it's going to be a while because they got to plan it. I mean, first of all, you don't want to do it right away, right?
Yeah, yeah,
um, and they were talking about some. I guess there's more protocol to put into place.
sure.
I don't know what.
Well, that's going to be a big deal for us to see as well, right?
Yeah,
Like whether it's Charles or whomever. um,
it'll
you
be
know,
Charles.
the coronation, like that's a big deal. And it's a lot of pomp and circumstance. I get it. My husband thinks it's kind of silly, but I don't care,
Right. Well, and it's because we don't have anything like it. Like
We don't
if
have
we
it.
had
It's
that
the
here, we'd be like,
closest thing.
okay, well, that's for them.
It's the closest thing to a fairy tale, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
royalty. Coronation, the closest thing we've got is Frozen.
Well,
Walt
and
Disney.
there's other royalty in the world, but for some reason we have
Absolutely.
just like only hear about or mostly hear about the Queen of England, and probably because
Well,
of our ties to England. But
because of our ties and also
yeah,
because of her length of reign,
true. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's kind of unheard of.
And the size. I mean, she's the Queen
Right.
of the UK. So,
She's kind of got fingers touching everywhere, right?
right.
So, and speaking of that, so now the new line of succession, we know that Charles did take the name Charles the third. There was some question of whether he would use a different monarch name, but he did stick with Charles, which I'm glad. So he's Charles the third, and a lot of people receive new titles, which is normal whenever things pass down because they kind of just have their normal who gets what, right? So you just fall into it. So now William and Kate are now the Prince and Princess of Wales, which that's what Charles and Diana were, right?
Yes, yes.
Right. So that is now into that, which means that Prince George is Prince George of Wales, Princess Charlotte of Wales, Prince
Right.
Louis of Wales.
Yeah.
And that is the line. We have William, George, Charlotte, Louis. Then goes into the Duke of Sussex, which is Harry. And Archie and Lilibet after Harry. After that goes Duke of York, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, and that's
So, speaking of the Duke of York,
mhm,
you know, the American television stations had British correspondents that they were working with
sure.
to kind of translate everything for us, explain to us what was happening, why it was happening.
Yes.
And one of the things that was said was that after yesterday, the funeral, do not expect to see Andrew anymore, that he will not be a part of anything that Charles does.
Hmm.
And there's still, I know we're going to talk about later, but there's still lingering questions as to what role Harry and Meghan will play.
Yes.
But that the time of Andrew is over.
Yeah.
So whether he keeps his title of the Duke of York,
Right. Still to
what
come.
happens with that is still everything they didn't want to address that. And other thing to go back to the funeral just briefly is one thing I appreciated hearing is after all this full public display that the burial was just for the family. It was not going to be on camera. That was their one-on-one time alone with their
Yes.
grandmother and their family. And then on top of the 7 days of national mourning, there's a 7-day additional mourning period that started yesterday for the royal family themselves to all be
Yes.
together and mourn
And really
figure
don't
things
plan to
out.
see
Yeah.
to see them for a few days
Right.
publicly. Right.
Right.
Which I love that.
I'm just glad they got their private moment because, again, extremely awkward to watch. You know, as awkward as it was to watch Harry and William walk behind their mother's casket, which was completely awkward, I felt the same way
Mhm.
watching them just kind of be gawked at their grandmother's funeral. You know, it was
Yep. Oh yeah.
it
Oh
was
yeah.
it was weird.
Well, so to finish out, basically, let's say top 20. All right. So we've got after Archie and Lilibet, we have Duke of York, which we've said that's Andrew. We don't know where that's going to change or stand in the future, but as of right now, he's number 8 in line. Okay. After him comes Beatrice, and her daughter, Sienna, comes after her. Then it's Eugenie and her son, August, after that. Master August is his name. Then comes Earl of Wessex, which is Edward. He's the...
So is Anne not in line?
She comes after Edward. Yep, it goes Earl of Wessex with Viscount Severn, which is James, the son of Edward, and Lady Louise, which is the daughter of Edward. Then is the Princess Royal. That's Anne, right?
Yeah, but isn't
So-
she the second born?
But I think then it was boys first.
So did Queen Elizabeth change that for
I believe
Charlotte?
that was changed for Charlotte.
Oh,
That's what
okay.
I recall, is that now it's pure order.
Okay.
So yeah, Princess Royal is 16th in line now. And after her comes Peter Phillips and his daughter, which is Anne's granddaughter, Savannah, and then another granddaughter, Isla, and then comes Zara.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I didn't realize that Anne was after all the boys.
I think that had been the case all along. And since Elizabeth and Margaret were the only girls, obviously Elizabeth was the oldest. But when it became a male heir, they take the throne first, and then the girl gets bumped to the end. I believe I saw that in The Crown, actually.
It's a good historical piece of knowledge that you pick up watching these shows.
That's what that was. And then, but I do recall this being different now when Charlotte was born.
Okay. I do recall hearing something about her changing something for Charlotte. I just didn't realize that that's what it meant. I didn't realize that Anne was not
Right.
or was behind her brothers in line. I don't think I put those two together.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was actually a little bit of like Anne's upbringing as well. I think she's always known that. That's always been the case for Anne. So Anne kind of came up being like,
I'll never get it.
I'm not touching the seat. So whatever I want to do, it's kind of cool, you know?
So this was just so that
Hey
if
guys,
Charlotte...
I'm going to wear a uniform everywhere. And
Right. What are y'all
I'm
going to do
stand
about
up
it?
here. What are you going to do? Kick me off the throne? Oh, that's right. You got to kick all your kids off first.
Yeah. So that would mean that Louis can't jump over Charlotte. And then if
Right.
George were to have daughters, before sons, that they could be queen
They could be
versus
queen.
the boy
George's
jumping
daughter
over.
could be queen if she was first.
Okay.
That's what I understand.
Unless somebody else changes it.
Correct. Yeah, unless Charles and William get stingy or
And
something.
I don't see that being popular.
No.
I can see Charlotte, maybe Charlotte's little personality, maybe like, hold up, Papa.
No. This is not going to fly.
Gran
No,
said.
Yeah, exactly. Gran said, I'm in line. No, which I
Look,
like.
I have the paper here.
Yeah. And honestly, like, order of birth, easy enough, right? Like, if it all happens to be boys, so be it. Fine, whatever. But I mean, order of birth, let's just keep it across the board. That's fine.
And we can see how effective a queen was. So it's not like she's going to mess everything up.
Right. Yeah. No, I think people are going
I'm
to be
worried about the king messing everything up. like, don't mess up anything that she put in place. All right. Let's.
like everybody's like looking at Charles and being like, just don't touch anything.
Don't do anything.
Just smile and
turn on the lights.
Wave.
Turn off the lights.
Do the wave. Do the salute. Bow your head every once in a while and just don't touch anything.
It's fine. Just
his like hand or whatever they call it.
I've been waiting 70 years. Who cares?
Trusted advisor. You're sitting there going, just tell him where to go. Point him in the right direction.
Shake hands, cut ribbons. Let's go back to the old way of doing things.
That's right. Well, it'll be an interesting year, probably years worth of Charles and his adjustments, right? Let's just see. We'll wait and see.
It looks weird seeing him and Camilla sitting on thrones. Camilla does not look comfortable.
Well,
she just looks like she doesn't know how to sit.
Camilla, I've been torn on her during this whole funeral stuff, right? One, I'm still not a fan. Two, she looks like she is like lost.
All the time.
She looks like, if you see a close-up of her during the funeral, she looks like she cannot tell you how to walk a straight line. I heard something the other day after the Queen had passed away, and all these people online were doing, like on TikTok, there's been a royal talk or a Queen talk, right? Where people have started posting a lot about, it's maybe someone that lives in England and they're actually posting like, here's what's really happening, or here's what's going to happen next. Or for those of you that don't understand royal succession or whatever, right? They're giving out some details and stuff. So this woman posted the other day that if you have seen the movie The Notebook, and if you like it, then you should be a fan of Charles and Camilla.
I'm not like she doesn't know what's happening. Like she doesn't recognize anything that's going on. Does she have dementia?
Maybe. But the love story of those two.
No.
She says if you like the story of The Notebook and Allie and Noah's story on there, then you should be a fan and be on the side of Charles and Camilla.
No.
And I was like, how dare you?
First of all, don't blast me with The Notebook like that.
How dare you, sir? Thank you, sir. No way.
No.
So I was very surprised by that. But, she broke down, obviously, the whole, like, they dated beforehand. They weren't allowed to get married. They were kept apart, blah, blah, blah. They both went and found other people and then, like, were allowed to come back after those people had gone and all. And she was like, obviously, the biggest difference is that there was a lot more caring about Princess Diana than there was Lon in the movie, the guy that Allie goes and ends up being engaged to. People didn't care about him as much as they do Princess Diana. Anyway, I digress. I was offended.
As you should have been. Yes.
I chose to unfollow her. Let's just be honest. So Charles Camilla thing, that's going to still take some time getting used to. I still feel weird seeing her there. I feel like she shows up at things and people kind of go, all right. Like,
Yeah.
oh, she's an L here. That kind of thing. But it's been a long time. I know she's been there a long time. It's just still weird for me to see. But let's go ahead and discuss the Fab Four, if we shall. The former Fab Four. So we get our first taste of excitement of the Fab Four coming out and seeing the tributes outside of Buckingham Palace to, I think it was
Windsor.
Windsor, excuse me.
Yeah.
They came out of Windsor grounds to go out to where the public had paid tribute and were standing vigil and whatnot. So we, of course, are talking about Harry and Meghan and William and Kate. This podcast is sponsored by Jackson Creative, a custom communication agency located in downtown Hickory, North Carolina, specializing in online content creation. To learn more, visit thejacksoncreative.com. Jackson Creative, we tell your story. The four of them came out. People were ecstatic. Oh my gosh, the four of them are together. Look at this. Isn't this exciting? And then I tell you what, Jeanette, this entire time you can cut the tension with a knife between the four of them. That's just my feeling.
Yeah. One of the
feel
correspondents
awkward watching them.
Well, I mean, we've got to keep in perspective. We're talking about a grandmother's funeral too, so there's all that going on. But one of the British correspondents on TV said that was Charles's doing. He wanted the four of them to go make an appearance together.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Outside of Windsor, and they did it, and it seemed fine.
Yep.
But
I feel like it. I was excited to see it. I think it was a great show not a show. I mean, I know they were genuine, it's like you said, it's their grandmother. Like the brothers are there, in mourning. But as you said earlier, it's unfortunate to see people gawking at them and talking about their drama throughout the time of the grandmother's funeral, right? So it's really hard to separate because unfortunately, the last time we saw them all together, they looked miserable then too. And it wasn't because somebody had died.
Right. Yeah.
It's just hard to, I don't know.
I'll be interested to see what happens over the next few months.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a lot of talking between the family, between the three men, because let's face it, now they're not the grandchildren of the queen. They are the children of the king. So it's different. Their grandchildren, their children are now the grandchildren of the king. Yeah. It's different.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that Harry feels differently now. He would want his children to have their proper place, to be more secure, as the children of a king is different than the grandchildren of a queen, regardless of where you live.
So do you think he's going to just kind of try to work his way back in?
I can see I don't know, personally, I don't know that there would be full on let's jump in feet first back into it. I could see a gradual coming back into it.
Some appearances, things like that.
Harry makes some appearances. Harry does things on behalf of his father.
Right.
Takes a part in the coronation. I could also see a potential negotiation for a move back to London. Again, we're talking about the child and the grandchildren of a king. They're more susceptible outside of the UK to be used as bait, I should say. We're still talking about a political world.
But how do people take that? If he could, if hypothetically, let's say that starts to happen, right? He starts to work his way back in a little bit. And I don't mean in a bad way, manipulative way. I mean, like he's invited in, right? And he chooses to take part in this. Coming back to London, let's say. How do people take that when, it's not like he moved 30 years ago to the United States to have a fresh life. He moved recently when he knew his father's going to be king somewhat soon.
Right. I think people would be happy because they would see it as honoring his grandmother.
Sure.
I would think there'd be hope that if that happens, if he comes back, that Charles can control the media and say,
Like Tom Brady, right?
well, but I
I
can
mean,
also see an
Charlotte's
instance
like,
where,
no, I just changed my mind. Like,
well,
don't
but I
want
mean,
to
if we
do
think
that.
about the reasons he did it, and again, their place in line has changed, their
Yeah,
status has changed,
sure.
um, and I could see a scenario where Harry is a working royal, but Meghan is not. So
Right.
it's Meghan, if you don't want to be in the spotlight, don't want to be criticized, you don't have to be a working royal, but I have to serve my duty to honor my grandmother and my father's position. Because let's be honest, when William becomes king, there's really not a role for Harry. He's the brother of the king.
Right.
So really his only role is as the son of the king. So it's his
Right.
as the fourth in line to the throne.
With
Obviously
his
we look
children
at it
behind him.
right. And let's face it, I mean, if something were to happen to William, you know, Charles or George is too young to be king, so Harry would
Right.
have to step in
Yeah.
as someone, whatever they call it when you're standing in place for the king.
Interim.
You're interim king, I guess. I don't know, but or there'd have to be something in place where you'd say, okay,
Yeah.
is he too young? Do we jump to Harry
Sure.
and then jump back to? I don't know
Sure.
how all that works, but
Right. Well, I agree with you, and I would love to see it. Right. Like I would love to see that. I would love to see it. But let's talk about why, their place at the funeral, okay, and all of the protocol around it. So we know a big discussion was that, Charles did not have them come to the kind of honoring dinner or whatnot that took place several days ago, because they did note that it was for working royals. Okay, and I know a lot of people were like, that's just wrong. Like, that's his grandmother and all. And it's like, well, but wait a minute. Like, Harry did choose to not be a working royal. And if that's the rule, then it's not like Harry's getting his feelings hurt. That's just the rule for everybody, right? Beatrice and Eugenie are not working royals, right?
no.
Right. So it's kind of like that, it's just, hey, you get to go hang out with your cousins while William has to go to the stuffy dinner. But the big controversy and discussion was over Harry wearing his military uniform throughout different events that took place. Harry and Andrew were both not allowed to wear their military uniforms for the processionals, which they wore morning coats instead, and they did get to put their medals on there. But they also were not allowed to salute during the royal salute to the casket. And some people have lost their minds over that. But what we have to remember is when he stopped becoming a working royal and chose to leave, his military status was taken away, right? I'm not saying I agree with any of it, but it was just one of these things like, he kind of knew that though when he chose this.
Yeah, and I think, not that this was any thought that goes into it, but part of me, if it were me, I'd be thinking all the things that I'm missing. I didn't take this into account
100%.
when I decided this was not the life I wanted. I didn't take these things into account because
Well,
those weren't the things on my mind. But
that
now
is
he's got to
why.
be thinking, if this is my father and I'm at my father's funeral, I don't want to not be able to sit in the front row or
Yep.
salute my father.
Yep.
It's bad enough that I couldn't do that to my grandmother.
Yep.
I've really got to reconsider
Oh
our
no,
role in
that's
this family.
exactly what I've been thinking the whole time when I watch him walking in that processional without the uniform on, without being able to salute, without almost the I know, like, we all know that William is going to be king. He's in line to be king, and Harry's known that his whole life. But we've still usually seen them just right beside by side, you know? And
Yeah.
they always kind of have that look of, I mean, it's just the two boys, right? It's the brothers together. They're standing side by side. We know William's going to be king, but Harry is always there beside him. And that's not been the case during this celebration, if you will, these festivities. It was kind of sad to watch. And I personally, I know I would be just like that. I'd be like, oh crap, I forgot that I can't do this stuff. Or, oh wow, I have to sit on the second row beside my cousins, back with the other non-working people, instead of beside my brother, where I've always been, for my grandmother's funeral. And I have to wear a morning coat and, next to my uncle who has been banned from, everything, not because he tried to make a better life, but because he is a royal screw up. But it's sad to see. And I agree with you. I think there's got to be a part of him that's got in the back of his mind, like, oh gosh, like, I don't know if I can do this again. I need to be back in here. Like, I need to be a part of this to help, like, to take my role seriously and to do this and do that. But
I think there'll be a lot of discussion with his father over the next several months
I hope
about
so.
the role that
I
his
hope
father
so.
wants him. I know we all heard that Charles wants a slimmed down monarchy, but we don't know what that means.
Yeah.
I mean, you would
Yeah.
think that he'd want his children and grandchildren involved in some way.
Yeah.
And I think also part of it has to be thinking of not only Harry for himself, but Harry for his children. And the fact that they're making a decision about royal life and protocol and all
Yeah.
that for their children, when again, they are the grandchildren of
Mhm.
a king, and their children grow up in California, and then their grandfather
Yeah.
with in 20
Yeah.
plus years could see the same thing, right?
Oh yeah.
Do they know how to serve their role? Do they
Because
know
what? Charles is 73, 76, something like
70
that.
something? Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
So I mean, it's not like we're going to have another 70-year reign.
right.
This
So
is
you've got to be thinking
this is
about
going to be a shortened
children.
version.
And your children, by the way, have now gotten the titles that you've wanted because
That's
they
right.
are grandchildren of a
Of the
king.
king. Yes.
So you've got to be thinking, there's got to be a happy medium.
Yeah.
Or Megan, things have changed.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of talking that's going to be done between William, Harry, and
Yeah.
Charles over the very near future and into the months. I don't think we'll know what the role will be until after the coronation or leading
I
up to the
agree.
coronation.
I agree. So with that, let's talk about Meghan and Kate. First of all, before we get to Meghan, because I'm going to be eye rolling enough during that, but Kate is stunning. She's stunning. Like, her poise, her grace during this. I love her. I just love her. And I can't express it more, but she is stunning. And to see her take on the role, which I feel like has been, she's always served as she's always appeared as someone who knows, I'm going to be married to the king one day. Like, I'm having to accept this and get prepared and be prepped and practice and all of this. And, when the four of them made their appearance outside of Westminster, there was, all this discussion about, oh, Harry and Meghan were like holding hands, and she would put his hand on his back and her hand on his back and all this stuff. And they were like, but, Kate and Will never touched. Yeah, because he's going to be king. Like, they don't, that's like part of protocol, right? If you watch Kate during these things, she'll get out of a car and she'll walk up to someone. She does not shake hands or greet someone until William has come in before her. She may talk to them, but then she gently puts William in front of her, and that's all part of protocol. I've watched a little clip of it online. But everybody talks about how Kate is fitting this role and is taking on this responsibility, as we see William obviously knowing that this is going to be the case one day. They're preparing their family for this. They're doing all the things right. But we see Kate in a moment like this, paying tribute to grandmother by wearing the necklace, right, that Elizabeth wore as well as Diana wore, and now Kate's wearing. Meghan did wear a pair of earrings that were gifted to her from the Queen. Kate is playing the role of a mother as well by bringing her children to this, the ones that were old enough, brought George and Charlotte, which I thought was fantastic. They added a little bit of lightheartedness that was probably needed, but it was so precious to see them and taking on that role as well. But I'm just continue to be impressed by Kate. And Meghan throughout this served as a very silent support to Harry, right? She stood behind, she walked behind, she sat behind and rode behind in cars and everything. She was very clearly, behind everybody else, which that's fine. That's the role that they have taken on. But it is, it's weird to see. I saw a picture of Meghan and Kate relatively close to each other standing outside the funeral yesterday. And Kate looks somber and poised, and Meghan looks sly to me. Does that make sense? She looks a little slimy to me.
I think she probably was uncomfortable. Let's be honest. She's probably uncomfortable. She knows everybody's watching and trying to figure out, are they going to talk? I mean, and to their credit, none of the royals talked in public. They were all very silent. Even on the car rides, there was no talking, no discussion. It was just all very silent. But I probably don't blame her. I would feel the same way. I wouldn't know how to act because I know the cameras are looking for a reaction.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was some sadness there, but she probably hasn't spent as much time. Well, she definitely hasn't spent as much time with the Queen or the family as Kate has. Yeah. So while there's sadness, there wasn't that deeper connection. She spent the last 2 years or 3 years over here. Yeah. And yes, they may have videoed and FaceTimed, but it's not the same.
Right.
And she's also probably thinking in the back of her mind, this is going to change a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think she's probably preparing herself for not only, let's just say hypothetically that nothing changes, right? Like Harry and Meghan say, nope, we're staying put, we like where we are, all that stuff. There's still this year, I guarantee, going to be a role that Harry still has to play in the coming months, even though he's not a working royal, but as a family member, son of the king. There will still be a lot of work travel for daddy, if you put it that way, right? Like this coming year is going to be different than they have experienced. And so I think Meghan knows that too.
Well, and let's face it, the boys are more popular than dad.
Yeah.
The Queen was extremely popular. So I would think that part of William and Harry's role would be to go out there amongst the people and let's make daddy popular. Yeah. let's let people know that we are a unified family.
And let's take the heat off us for a little bit. Let's put it on daddy for a while.
Right. Yeah.
Like he's king now. Let's do this. But they're going to have to show some sort of solidarity between the two of them, because right now I think it's uncomfortable for people to see just even Will and Harry.
They
Not
are going to
that
have to do
relationship.
some trips together,
They're going
some
to have to do
shaking
some
of the hands
cigar.
together, some
Yeah,
Commonwealth visits
yeah,
together.
yeah.
That's what people want. They don't want to see the wives.
Right, right.
The wives will come later, but they want to see, are
Agreed.
the two boys together
Yeah.
for some time, and then we
Yep.
slowly bring the wives back in.
Because people were so used to that. I mean, do you remember how sweet it was at each of, well, let's just say, especially at William's wedding, when the two of them were standing up there talking and like almost
Yeah.
whispering, waiting for Kate to walk down the aisle and stuff. Those type of things, like, we're just not getting anymore. And it's obvious and it's blatantly like uncomfortable. So I'm very curious to see where this next year takes them in their, as you said, let's make daddy popular tour, right? Let's figure that out. And speaking of Charles, again, I know that we are still learning and getting comfortable with him being the king, but as a son, something that I tend to forget, honestly, was that he was a son, first and foremost. He'd been with the queen the longest, right? I mean, he's the oldest. And he's always known that he's going to be king someday. And so he's been filling that role of trying to make mommy proud. But we did see that I loved the speech he gave, which he televised, which was pretty unheard of, but I was glad that he did it because that is reaching that little bit different demographic now, right? That he's, going on television and stuff in front of people. But, he spoke of his mom very sweetly and genuinely. And then we did learn that there was a handwritten note on her coffin in the flowers, which the flowers I did hear were a nod to her wedding flowers, the bouquet that she carried at her wedding, which I thought was fantastic. And did you see the star of the coffin? There was a spider spotted walking on the card, across the card and into the flowers on the coffin as it was lying in state, or
I didn't see
during
that.
the funeral. And a spider is supposed to be good luck in this type of situation because it represents strong femininity, and it's very classy and a symbol of togetherness, I guess, like a woven symbol and like a web. And so all these people online spotted the spider and said, it's the most popular spider ever now. And talking about how much of a good omen and good luck it was. And it was crawling across the card and into the flowers.
I didn't see it, and I didn't know that about the spider.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
So,
interesting.
yeah, why not, right? There you go. So let's see. The king's new signature comes with his new place in sovereign. The R stands for Rex, which means king in Latin, whereas Regina was queen in Latin. And so that's where the ER and now CR will go. So we'll start to see all of that stuff switch around. But Charles, I'm not mad at him how he's been handling this thus far. He's been doing just fine. We'll give him a little pat on the back, and hopefully things can continue and that he does step up the modern style. That's something else I would hope the boys would come in and be able to be like, no, Dad, really, don't be so stuffy about it. Like, let's do it. You should do it this way or whatnot. But we'll see. Lots of famous people at the funeral, lots of dignitaries, people from around the world, all sorts of royalty from around the world. I mean, you name a royal, right? And then there's presidents of state, and of course, all of the government officials and whatnot. I enjoyed seeing a lot of these people walk in. A lot of people wearing the traditional mourning coats or hats for the ladies. lots of black, but I do think it was a well-attended affair. I did hear that President Trump was not allowed to attend. Fine by me, but interesting. That was part of her note. That was part of the ruling.
Oh, really?
Yeah. At what point do you add that to your will? Right? People that are not allowed to come. If you go through and look at some of the list of people that were there and see some coordinating photos, it is so cute to see her cousins, the Queen's cousins, like these little old people that are there attending. And quite honestly, people that you've never even thought about the fact that, oh, yeah, she's got cousins, like it's like a family get together. It's weird, but lots of people, everybody came to pay their respects. And if you get a chance to look through the list, I think it's pretty cool of the people that all came. Some, as we mentioned, George and Charlotte, Prince George and Princess Charlotte were there. Charlotte has made herself known in this world. Not only was she donning her first hat to a royal affair, which does, as you get a little bit older, is sort of expected at fancy events, but she has worn her first hat out there. She was in all black as well, and was kind of brought through the entire processional. They did note that King Louis was just deemed a little too young for this, or Prince Louis was deemed a little too young for it. But have you seen the video of Charlotte telling George when to bow?
Yes. She's
adorable. She's like, now's the time to bow, boy. Like, do something.
She's going to be like his right hand when he.
I love it. I love it. The kids, they said that Louis, I did read that Kate mentioned to somebody that Louis was having a little bit harder time understanding the concept of what had just happened with the funeral and with the death of grandmother, but that George and Charlotte were handling it beautifully. They agreed that they wanted to attend the funeral stuff. So I think they understand the gravity of it, if you will. And, I thought it was great to see them there, honestly.
They looked very nice, and they were very well behaved.
Very well behaved, very curious. Like, you can tell they were soaking it all in. They were watching everything. They were, but we saw Kate walking them in with her hand around them, and we saw Sophie walking George out with her hand behind George, like her arm around him. Again, Sophie being very emotional and involved in a lot of this, but I thought everybody looked lovely. Everybody looked very well put together, and respectful. A lot of brooches. Charlotte was wearing a horseshoe brooch that grandmother gave, or that the Queen gave her, for their love of horses that they both share. So, a lot of people wearing the jewelry that was given to them either by the Queen or representing the Queen. That's lovely. So very cool to see them there. But probably not as cool as seeing the Queen's beloved corgis attend the funeral. Talk about a gut wrench right there. Seeing those dogs just sit outside the funeral and wait and be with their handlers. I mean, I still don't know how I feel about them going to live with Andrew and Fergie.
I mean, gotta give him a job, I guess, right? That's her one little.
That's the thing.
Have my dogs.
It's like everybody loves the corgis so much, and then she's like, "Fine, Andrew gets the corgis," and you're like, "Oh, come on!" Like,
Edward have them.
I know. Edward seems so cool, but maybe Fergie's our saving grace on that. I don't know. Because they still live together,
Yeah.
Weird, Andrew and Fergie. But I do appreciate the fact that they showed that, as well as along the processional line. from the cart was the Queen's pony that stood waiting for the processional as well. You know, that's something that we're all very used to seeing her with, right? Does Charles have a pet?
I don't know.
Not that we know of, right? Like, we've never like seen him associated with something, right? Did he ride polo? I know William
Yeah, he
does.
did.
Did Charles?
I think so.
So
Yeah.
maybe he likes
Remember seeing?
horses.
Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, I think I remember seeing him with like the early Diana pictures, right?
Hmm.
Like when he was really young. So maybe he's got a thing with horses. Maybe he does have a dog or something. I don't know. Like, I think that could be a good PR move though, right? Get a dog?
Yeah, I
Makes you look a little
guess.
softer. I don't know. He just seems so stiff and crotchety.
So Balmoral was a personally owned place, right? That wasn't part of the royal palaces. That was their personal.
Oh, I don't know.
So I wonder if he inherits that as well. Because, that's where the family would get away.
That was where their holidays were spent.
Yeah.
And according to the Crown and various Queen movies and documentaries, remember we talked about that's where the Thanksgiving scales were?
Right, yes.
Where you get weighed. And then also, like, they showed Christmases at Balmoral. That was...
Yeah, I mean, everything's going to change, right? Does Charles host Christmas? Because, let's face it,
Yeah,
it was it was their mother and the grandchildren. So now that's really just Charles, his two boys, and their families, right?
Well, yeah, and that means you gotta...
Do you invite Andrew and Edward and Anne?
Like, you've got Harry and Meghan on one end that who really know? I mean, like, they'll get invited, but do they come? Do they say, "Ooh, we've got other plans"? Like, I don't know. And then you've got Andrew, who's messed up.
He's not going to be invited,
right?
The kids will be invited, but he won't be invited.
You get the grand nieces, maybe second nieces, whatever. Get those people, and then thank goodness for Edward and Sophie. Like, long live Edward and Sophie. Like, I feel like they're just holding things together for us, huh?
Maybe.
Stability at its finest right now.
I don't know how it works when you're a sibling of a monarch. I don't know how that works.
I mean...
What is your role? Like...
Maybe sit at home and thank your lucky stars, right? Like, right. Maybe you're sitting at home going, I'm glad I can sit here and roast chicken with my wife or whatever and not have to deal with all this crap.
See, and that's what I'm thinking about.
I'm going to get to have the fun by being, like, is Edward a working royal? Yes, right?
I know Sophie is. I don't know if Edward is he?
I don't know.
Maybe I read he was a part-time working royal.
You can be part-time? Like,
you can do what you want when your mom's the queen, right? And you're her baby.
What is Harry doing?
Because he owns his own, like, company, or he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
I'm about to find out, right?
I think he does some things. Like, he'll go to some openings and do some things.
Edward is the man. Like,
Edward's like, I am the baby. Mom said I can do what I want when I want.
Mommy said I could have my own business. Let's see here. I'm looking at this. There's a list. All right. Who are the working royals? All right. His Majesty the King. Check. Queen Consort Camilla. Check. Duke and Prince and Princess of Wales. Check. Both of them are. Anne, Princess Royal, is working member. The Earl and Countess of Wessex. Edward and Sophie.
Okay, so they're both working. Okay.
It says the Queen's youngest son, Prince Edward, and his wife Sophie are working royals who regularly represent the Queen on various occasions. Their children, Lady Louise Windsor and James Viscount Severn, are not working royals, but they will join their parents on the balcony for Trooping of the Colour.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see how that all changes. Again, when it was the queen, it was her children and grandchildren and great grandchildren.
And get this. And then the last working royals are the Duke and Duchess of Gloucestershire, Prince Richard and Birgit.
Right. So these are all family members of.
Who is Birgit? That's the Queen's first cousin. Prince Richard might be a lesser known royal to some, but as the Queen's first cousin, he's been full-time working member of the royal family for years. He and his wife, Birgit, attend national and international events in support of the Queen and her duties as head of state.
See, why can't Harry and Meghan do that? Because we didn't know about them.
I could care less about them. So probably press as well. Like, why won't so will those people change? So that guy was the cousin of the Queen.
So I'm thinking
So is Charles
Charles
gonna
gets
have,
to
like,
choose. I
a
think Charles
change
gets
of
to choose.
people?
Yeah. So that's where they kept saying that Charles wants a slimmed down monarch.
Yes.
To me, when you say slim down, I'm thinking he's thinking him and his children.
Right,
The
right.
siblings are no longer need to be working royals.
You don't
I mean,
think?
I may be wrong.
I think Anne and Edward will stay working royals just for the sheer fact of the crossover between Mummy and Charles now.
Maybe, yeah.
They served as working for the Queen, so they know those protocols. They know how to be basically the stand-in for the sovereign, right?
Yeah.
And so they're going to send Edward and Sophie to like New Zealand and Zimbabwe or wherever
Right.
all the time,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, I guess I could see that, and they would all still join him on the balcony because they are his brothers and
They're
sisters.
going to anyway, so might as well have them as the working people, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's
maybe
just
the
as close as
president,
the
that might
to the
change.
queen because I mean it is their brother, so it's just as close as
Yeah.
them to the queen. It's not like it's William's uncle. It's a little bit
Exactly.
different. Like this is Charles's brother, so yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
And then, of course, things really could change whenever William becomes king,
Oh, for sure.
because that really changes the dynamics.
Because you would think by
Of
that
what-
time maybe George, potentially Charlotte, would be old enough to be working royals. They'd be
Sure.
in their 20s.
Yeah,
Potentially Charles or George in his late 20s.
yeah,
Some role for Louis.
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Potentially a role for Archie and Lilibet.
I wonder if he would ever put Eugenie and Beatrice in working roles.
Do they want to be?
Oh, I
They
don't know.
seem to be enjoying
I'm
life the way it completely is. Like,
Maybe, but by that time they're older. They have children gone out of the house that are or close to or whatnot. Like, I just wonder if they try to reach out
you're
to
saying
that
William?
different generation. Yeah, when he's king.
Oh, maybe.
I wonder if they try to like put them in that role so that it is a different generation of working royals. So,
yeah, I
don't
can
know.
see that.
Anyway,
I don't know.
it'll be interesting to see.
To
That's
be
something
determined, I guess.
to be determined. Well, listen, I have one more thing I wanted to touch on, which may be kind of the coolest thing I've ever heard of, I guess. My favorite part of this whole changing of the guard, if you will. But I'm not sure if you've heard about it. But in keeping with tradition and protocol, the royal beekeeper has informed the queen's bees that the queen has died and King Charles is their new boss. This is a protocol that goes back centuries, okay? The royal beekeeper, a tradition that's thought to date back centuries, has informed the hives kept in the grounds of Buckingham Palace and Clarence House of the Queen's death. All the bees have been told in hushed tones that their new master is now King Charles III.
How did the bees
So-
take it?
Well, basically they said that they placed black ribbons tied into bows, put them on the hives, and that it's home to tens of thousands of bees. And he then urged the bees to be good to their new master. And It says this strange ritual is underpinned by an old superstition that not telling them of a change of owner would lead the bees to not producing honey and then leaving the hive and even dying. So it's like a little bit of a
Superstition?
superstition, a little bit of a tradition, whatnot combined together. But the man, I saw an interview, like a video interview with him, and this man who had been her beekeeper for a long time, like he's an older gentleman, and he's been the official beekeeper for over 15 years. Um, he had to go around and he tapped the corner of each of the hive boxes, and did this little speech with each one of them. And he said he felt very honored to do it because this was his role. And there was the expectation that whether it's silly or not, this tradition had always happened. And he was going to make sure it was done properly for his queen because he loved working for her. And I thought, well, that is beautiful.
That is nice. Yeah.
I love that. He knew it was a little silly. He's telling them like, "Hey, Charles is here now." He knew that, but he also respected tradition, which we have seen the queen does as well, right?
Right. The bees were probably like, well, our queen in the hive is still good, right? Because that's who we work for.
We work for the queen that's still here. But
thank you.
Yes, but good to know Charles is here now. So yeah, I wanted to finish with that because I thought that was kind of a feel good thing. I think it kind of represents like the little bit of lightheartedness that can go into things like these, but also the tradition that was held so prominently. It was displayed really throughout all of her, everything that has to do with this funeral, right? The processionals, the details, the music, the attendees, everything was just down to a T. And I've hated to see it, but I've thoroughly enjoyed watching this tradition and something that, like you said, who knows when these things happen and how often. And
now Charles has his own protocol in place, right?
Apparently that was ready to go into action as soon as London Bridge fell.
Wow. So. One of the most poignant things that I saw when they were televising the funeral, the procession right after the funeral on the way to Windsor, was there's a statue of the Queen's father and the Queen mother that was over somewhere. It's located somewhere, but they did a shot of it and it looked like they were overlooking the procession. And it was just so moving. It was kind of like, and then they would go on to describe that she's on her way to Windsor to be buried. So Philip will be moved to be buried next to her, and she'll join her parents and her sister, and they'll all be buried together. And I was like, oh, that's very sad.
I know, but lovely, right?
Lovely, yeah. She thought of literally everything.
Yeah. So I do have to tell you, that's funny that you brought that up. So I was explaining to my children all of this, and I was talking to them about protocol and what that means and how all of this stuff was just so detailed and planned out and very important. And as you know, and probably everybody that listens, my oldest daughter's name is Charlotte, right? And so she's taking a world history class right now, and her teacher refers to her as Princess Charlotte a lot because of, just it's a whatnot. Charlotte thinks it's funny. She was named, obviously, she's 15, so she was named this before royalty came into play. But they've just been curious because it's everywhere, right? And so I was explaining to them about this funeral and then why, 4 days here, 2 days here, this, that, whatnot. But I will say that I think I was explaining it quicker through my mouth and not as much in my head because I said, that the Queen was brought back to London, which is where she lives. That was her home, was London. And then the, burial is going to take place there. And that when they're buried, they actually get lowered into like a vault, in the floor and covered up, if you will, all this stuff. And so I'm explaining that how she's going to go into the floor. And my kids' eyes got real big and they were like, in their house? And I'm like, no, like in the church, they don't get it. Like the house was, I was saying she came to London where she lived, right? And I failed to say that she was in the church.
Oh,
themselves.
yeah, she was in.
So
Okay.
I laughed so hard, like because their faces.
They thought she was coming home to go into London, into the floor of her house.
Yes. Because I was like,
Well, she lived in London, so she's going to be buried in the floor. And they're like, oh my gosh, like, I don't want that for you or me.
they were like, in her house? Ew,
No.
But yeah, it was just, so that was just a weird concept, but I said it wrong. Yeah, but that's how I was saying it right in my head, but they just weren't picking all the pieces up. So anyway, it was just funny, and they've learned a lot, and I've learned a lot by telling them all of this stuff. And so it's just been a lovely week and a half, 2 weeks now that we're coming to the close of right now. Like you said, there's still plenty of stuff ahead with coronations and plannings and what's going to happen with working royals or not. And so I am glad that I have a friend in royal love with you, Jeanette. And so
plenty more to talk about.
I know there's going to be so much more to come. And you guys listening, thanks for tuning in to ChickChat, because I know that I received several messages on Instagram whenever the Queen passed of people sending to the ChickChat Instagram just like a tear or, an emoji of like a heart. People get it. People know we love the royalty. We like the royal family. We get it. They're a monarch. It's not really like it's not a real thing, like of power that they have, but we get it. We're girls. We like a fairy tale, and it's fun to follow. And so thank you all for tuning in to listening to us recount everything that we've noticed and what we're looking forward to in the future. Like I said, today was just a little bit of a recap, but we've got so much more to come. So if you have any questions or anything that you know about the royal family that you want to share with us, anything we were wrong on, or do you know more about Edward and Sophie? Because we'd love to hear it. By all means, shoot us a message on Instagram at our ChickChat our page, as well as Facebook, The Mesh, the network that we are proud to be a part of. Go check out everything else on themesh.tv. Got something for everybody on there with all kinds of podcasts. But until then, Jeanette, long may she reign, and God save the king.
Yeah.
We'll catch you guys on the flip side.
You've been listening to The Mesh, an online media network of shows and programs ranging from business to arts, sports to entertainment, music to community. All programs are available on the website as well as through iTunes and YouTube. Check us out online at themesh.tv. Discover other network shows and give us feedback on what you just heard.